Sony had the right idea for mini phones, of course. Take the flagship and make it smaller for those who don't want something gigantic, yet without compromising the specification too much. Sony also got the size drop about right, and think the Z1 Compact, for example. HTC has missed the mark on both counts here with the appallingly clumsily named One Mini 2, yet bizarrely manages to come up with an Android smartphone that's more desirable day to day than all the previous Sony or HTC models. A paradox, yes, but fear not, for I shall explain. There are different ways to look at the One Mini 2, you see. Relative to the original one, this is 3mm narrower and much less droppable, adds expandable storage and does away with the disappointing ultra-pixel camera. Relative to the enormous M8, the One Mini 2 is quite a bit smaller and over 20 grams lighter, plus again has an arguably better camera. Relative to the Sony devices, this feels far more comfortable in the hand and has a better screen. Along the way, there are a few compromises, of course. The 4.5-inch 720p screen is on the small side for a device of this size, and the processor's only, in quotes, a Snapdragon 400 with 1 gig of RAM. But I can't emphasize enough that, specs be damned, I like the One Mini 2, if only it had a different name, and I'd pick it over all the models just mentioned for day-to-day use. A price of £360 or so in the UK is perhaps slightly on the high side, but then you do get the mainly metal build, the incredible speakers on the front, and a genuinely hand-curved design. As with previous ones, the issue of radio waves and metal has been solved with the embedding of aerials and the plastic edging on the sides, on the top and in the bands here, and I had no issues at all with signal strength. The borders between materials and the general fit and finish is excellent. The One Mini 2 feels superb in the hand. With the exception of pop-out nano SIM and micro SD trays here at the top of each side. HTC doesn't seem to have mastered the use of these yet. Maybe this is an early production model. Hopefully it'll be fixed. But I'm being a bit picky. As before with the One M7 and M8, the front of the design is dominated by the twin stereo speakers, and rightly so. Whether it's listening to podcasts or sat-nav instructions or YouTube videos as here, or simply trying a speakerphone call, having reliable, high-quality audio available from your phone is just stunning. As before, it's almost worth buying the One design just for this unique selling feature, if audio is important to you. Absolute volume is a contentious issue though. I claim that the boom sound speakers here are bested for volume by a few Nokia and Apple handsets, but there's no question in terms of fidelity and quality. Have a listen to this. HTC definitely has the edge here. Enough of that. On the M8, I railed at the way the black HTC bar here at the bottom was wasted space on the front fascia. Indeed, it's the same here, though with the smaller form factor overall and the need to still fit in mostly the same components, at least HTC's excuse that it needed the space underneath for components is at least believable here on the One Mini 2. You do lose screen real estate to the virtual controls in many apps, of course, and yes, I'd much rather have the original physical capacitive controls as on the original HTC One, but virtual controls do seem to be the way the industry is moving, so it's churlish to complain too much. However, this is the point in the review where I start to lose my temper, but in a bittersweet way. You see, the camera on the One Mini 2 is really good, or at least as good as the similar size sensors in the iPhone 5 range, most top-end Samsung Galaxies, if not matching the best Nokias. So why, and excuse my language here, why the bleep has HTC been fiddling around with low-resolution, ultra-pixel sensors for the last 2 years? Yes, the lower pixel count meant that real-time bursts could be taken ahead of the touch of a capture button. See my One review for that. And was very cool. And yes, low light performance was marginally better, but really, the number one complaint about HTC's flagships has been the low resolution of their captured photos on the cameras. And the One Mini 2 shows that the company's image processing algorithms are top-notch. Allied to a normal 1/3-inch 13-megapixel sensor, I managed to get some very decent photos from this ostensibly upper mid-range device, as you can see in the examples. I could complain that exposure is very sensitive to whatever's at the center of frame or whatever you've tapped on for focusing, and that highlights get easily blown out, but that would be picky of me. This isn't supposed to be a camera specialist phone by any means. There's no OIS as on the One M7 and no depth camera as on the M8, but the first of those was very limited in its execution and the latter was a mere gimmick. Give me the genuine 10 megapixel in 16:9 mode from the One Mini 2 at £200 less any day. This is test 1080p video footage here on the One Mini 2. Footage actually goes up at 1080p to 60 frames per second, but I didn't actually use this. The default, interestingly, is at 720p, which also matches the device's screen, which is probably best for most people's eyes and storage capacities. Rounding off the hardware side of things, and more disappointingly, the Snapdragon 400 inside, coupled with 1 gig of RAM, means somewhat lackluster performance, with an Antutu benchmark of only 17,000, equivalent to the 2-year-old Galaxy S3 in theory. In truth, there's little snap in the interface, no instant reaction as on the likes of the One M8 and its Snapdragon 801 with 2 gig of RAM. However, the odd seconds delay here and there as on the One Mini 2, while something loads up, is arguably not that significant in the grand scheme of things. Capacity is the same as on the One M8 and shouldn't be a problem for most people. Once updates are done after booting and settling in, you're already down to only 8 gig free of the Spect 16, but fear not, for HTC has put in the same micro SD facility. For media, music, captured images and videos and so on, plus some games can use this for resources, but your mileage will vary here. The battery's sealed again here, obviously, and barely adequate at 2100 mAh. The problem is that the Snapdragon 400 is actually less efficient than the newer and faster 801, with the result that, though slower, the One Mini 2 runs out of juice fairly easily on a heavy day's outing. How I wish the 801 had made the Mini spec reduction. There's another disappointment that comes with the budget processor 2, the necessary low power monitoring state that comes with the 801 and enables double tap to wake, missing here. While this may sound like a luxury, with HTC insisting on keeping the power button on the top of the device here, it means that simply turning on the screen is back to being a two-handed job effectively. The power button positioning at extreme top left is actually in the most awkward position for this control that could possibly have been chosen, for right-handers anyway. This is HTC's 6 skin on top of Android 4.4.2, so right up to date, and everything is virtually identical to that on the One M8. Blink feed is the same as on previous HTC devices and can be heavily customized or removed altogether if it doesn't float your boat. Of special note in the app set here is Zoe. The name for the original automated burst mode on the One's low-res 4 megapixel camera seems to live on here, or at least it will do. All we have at the moment is an entry in the main app list and coming soon when you tap it. All very mysterious. I'd guess at a server-side video amalgam of backed up photos and video clips similar to what Google already offers at the Google Plus end, e.g. when viewed from a desktop. The One Mini 2 is as confusing a device as its name, with some components dumbed down significantly from the One M8, processor, RAM, screen and battery, and others arguably raised significantly, camera. This is a device that needs to be assessed on its own terms rather than in relation to its ancestors. Yet even here, confusion reigns. The One Mini 2 is exactly the same length, stroke height, and thicker than the original HTC One, in which case, how exactly does it deserve the Mini branding in the first place? Come to think of it, the Nexus 5 is also the same height, stroke length, and with half an inch more display. That big HTC bezel has got a lot to answer for. The pricing of mid £300 in the UK is interesting, but arguably too high in a world in which the Motorola Moto G exists. With almost identical specifications in all areas except the camera, the Moto G is under half the price, making the One Mini 2's admittedly nice camera and metal design something of an expensive luxury. But the paradox is that in many ways I enjoyed using the One Mini 2 more than its larger sisters. The size, the shape, the overall package, and yes, the camera, they impressed me a lot. It remains to be seen how many of the target market will look past the confusing name, pick the device up, fall in love with it and end up agreeing with me.